recording. Okay, perfect. So, well, tenses. Tenses are probably the most, like, one of, if not the most important thing in French, because it can basically make or break your writing mostly. And well, yeah, it's pretty important. So I'm gonna basically go through, well, all of these. Présente, passé composé, imparfait, futur simple, futur proche, and passé récent, which are used less, but I mean, it's helpful to know anyway, I think. Plus que parfait, futur intérieur, subjonctif, conditionnel, and then gerondif. And then if you have anything else, you can let me know. Yeah, okay. So, we're gonna start with present. Present is the easiest, if not, like, well, it is the easiest. And it's basically used to say, I mean, to speak in the present, I guess. It's just normal, what you would usually use in French. It's the most basic verb. So the structure for present is the infinitive, and then obviously add a conjugated ending. Now, the thing with French verbs is there are a lot of exceptions. So that's the thing about French, and that's the thing that probably makes French really, really annoying. It's the fact that there are so many exceptions, but there are still some standardized conjugaisons, and so some of those are ER, IR, and RE. Those three are the three basic types of tenses, basically. Yeah, so someone asked what's ouvrir and offrir. Ouvrir is to open and offrir is to offer. Those are just, I put those two together because they're a group of tenses that are conjugated in the same way, basically. So they're both have the same endings for conjugaisons. Anyway, so for present, for ER verbs, I put it on the slide, so I won't say all of them out loud. But for example, aimer, or not aller, because aller is not a regular verb. Aimer, or adorer, or manger. These are like standard ER verbs. So they'll all be conjugated in the same way, where you get rid of the ER and you replace it with these endings. So for example, for aimer, it would be j'aime, tu aimes with an S, il, elle aime without an S. I am speaking. Can you not hear me? Give me a sec, guys.
It was him and that. It was him as well. I'm an innocent bystander.
No, it's okay. I don't mind, but like.
Oh, really?
But like, probably don't break shit in our flat.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I don't think
Sorry, I just returned. I'm in Uni-Accom and there's just shit going on all the time. Anyway, what was I talking about? Okay, yeah. So I was talking about ER verbs. ER verbs all have standard, not all, sorry. There's some regular ER verbs that have standard endings, which are as following, as seen on the slideshow. It's the, these endings, and then, so let's do an exercise. I'm gonna give you a ER verb and you have to conjugate it as if, well, you have to conjugate it how it's supposed to be conjugated. Let me think of one. No, I already did that. Okay. Here. Okay. everyone do the verb that I just put in chat, but also spoiler your answers by adding the 2 bars on either side of your answer, please, and thank you. Okay, well, while people attempt that, I'm gonna look at other stuff in the questions. How do you constantly remember vocabulary? Vocabulary is hard for sure. I think one way to do it is flashcards, obviously, but another way to do it would be like looking at like French news articles, French books. Like if you really love, like, for example, reading fiction books, you might want to pick up the French version alongside an English version that you're reading and try to read them simultaneously, and you'll pick up on a lot of cool vocabulary. So I did, when I was still doing French, I did that with Harry Potter. And I basically, because I was a really big Harry Potter fan, so I read, well, I'd already read all the English books, but I read the French book after, like just for fun, and it added a lot of vocabulary, in my opinion. But I will also do another session on vocabulary probably next week or something, and we'll talk about more vocabulary. Okay, I'm gonna check everyone's answers, which, I mean, most of you should get this right, but I'm gonna check anyway. Yeah, I think everyone got it right. Oh, just remember that when there's a vowel, you have to do J apostrophe, so it'll be j'adore. And then tu adore, il adore, etc., etc. But yeah, remember for je, the vowel clash will make it so that you have to get rid of the E in the je. But yeah, so that's ER verbs. Next, there are IR verbs. IR verbs is one where there are some normal ones, but then there's also a lot of exceptions. But some of those exceptions do fall into specific groups. So a normal IR verb, for example, would be finir, or to finish, FINIR. That would be a normal one. Some of the not normal ones, there's the group of sortir, partir, and dormir, and all 3 of them are conjugated in the same way. There is also ouvrir and offrir, which are both conjugated in the same way. So they have their specific endings. So for normal IR verbs, you get rid of the IR, and then you add in the IS, IT, ISSONS. You have to remember the double S in this, especially when you're doing verbs like choisir. So that's going to be my exercise for this one. Everyone conjugate choisir. That verb, what I just put in chat. Everyone conjugate that. But you have to remember the double S every time you conjugate, because if you forget that, then that's, I mean, it's wrong. Yeah, also, honestly, if you have like, if you want to talk in French, if you want to practice vocabulary or like grammar and stuff, just like find a buddy, and then like even within this, like there's like 9 people in this call right now. You can just like find a buddy and talk in French for like 10 minutes every day, and that also adds value, because the more you start practicing in French, the easier it becomes. Je choisis. Okay, everyone so far has been doing it right. Yeah, I think everyone so far is doing well. But yeah, definitely, you can find a buddy, or honestly, you can also text me if you want. I can't promise I'm great at French, but I will try my best if you want. Okay. Let me check. Je choisis, tu choisis, il a choisi, choisissons, choisissez, and choisissent. Perfect. Okay, everyone has gotten it right so far, so that's good. Yeah. So that's basically the normal IR verbs. And then there's the RE verbs. Now, the RE verbs are tricky because there's a lot more exceptions with RE verbs than there are normal RE verbs. So that makes it a lot trickier. But for the normal RE verbs, there's these endings where you get rid of the RE and then you just add an S for je and tu, you add an ONS, EZ, ENT for nous, vous, and il, elle. What would be an example verb for RE standard? Okay, everyone can do this verb, vendre. Also, someone has to, whoever, one of you has to say what it means. Whoever does it first will, you don't win anything, but you know. Je vends, tu vends, il vend, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils vendent. Yay. Okay. Jenna wins. I don't know what she wins, but she wins something. You're a winner, is all I can say, really. I don't know what you're winning. I can't, I could give you like a random roll, but I don't think they'll be, staff will be really happy if I do that, so I'm not gonna do that. Je vends, tu vends, ils, elles vendent, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils vendent. Well, Jenna, it's kind of cheating considering you do French A. Like, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Okay, you have to remember to remove the REs. So you have to remove the ending. It's for B and AB both. It's a mix. It's for both ab initio and B. It's general conjugaison. Some of the stuff in the later half you won't need to know really, but the beginning is useful for all, I think, I would say. I don't really know what ab initio covers, if I'm being honest, but it should. Bam. Okay, cool. So we're done with present. Anyway, you guys should have been good with present by now, considering you're all and most of you are M25, so you should already be done with that. But anyway, I went through it anyway for fun. Okay, so the next one is passé composé. I'm not going through passé simple because I can't do it, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Also, yeah. Whatever. Okay, passé composé. Passé composé is basically, if you directly translate it, it's compound past, composite past, whatever. It's basically past tense in French. So it's essentially used to describe completed actions in the past. So, for example, I had ice cream would just, yeah, that's a past tense. You guys all know what past tense is. I don't know why I'm going off about this. Anyway, so the structure for passé composé is you have to use, there's a pronoun, and then you have to use an auxiliary, and then the participe or past participle of the verb that you're trying to conjugate. So, yes, what Jana said, I was running or I had written, stuff like that, that's all past tense. It's something you did in the past, essentially. So yeah, so the way it works is the auxiliary is either être or avoir, which both you should know by now, although I have put the what's it called? Did I put mourir twice? What's the other one? Monter is the other one. Sorry. That's a bit of a, well, there you go. Fixed it. Yeah, my head was somewhere else. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, you should know être and avoir already, but those two are basically what is used as the auxiliary for the past participles. The PowerPoint is already on the channel, but I will link it again when I put the recording up for sure. Anyway, so for how to determine whether or not to use être or avoir as the auxiliary, there's a handy little acronym called Dr. Mrs. Vander Tramp. So basically it's devenir, revenir, mourir, retourner, sortir, venir, aller, naître, descendre, entrer, rentrer, I can't speak, bro, tomber, rester, arriver, monter, and partir. So those are the, how many are there? 16 verbs that use être as the auxiliary. There are those, and then there's also a whole subset called possessive, where all the possessive verbs use être, if that makes sense. Andrew, you're probably right, but Dr. Mrs. Van Tramp is just the way we're taught, just because it's simple for English speakers to remember for some reason. Because also, yeah, just is. But that does make a lot of sense. I just was never taught that way. But that's as a, like, French is like my fourth language, I can't lie, so sorry. Yeah. Any questions about French? Yes, I love that you, like, there's actual, like, native or French A speakers here, because it helps. It's easier. Will the other verb be in infinitive? No, the other verb is in participe passé. So the way participe passé works is there's a specific participe passé for each verb, which is basically the in English it's called the past participle. So for example, written, for write, written is a past participle. It goes from write to wrote to written. So write is just present, wrote is past, and written is the past participle. In French, there's also past participles, which is called participe passé. So for example, for each of these verbs, it's, well, actually, I'm gonna make you guys do this. So for each verb of Dr. Mrs. Van der Tramp, I want everyone to write down what the participe passé for each of those verbs is. You do just memorize them, because unless my fellow, A speakers have a trick. For me, I always just memorize them, and now I think I just mostly remember them. Well, the pattern for ER verbs, at least, is you get rid of the R and you add an E accent with it. So it would be, for example, manger would become manger, stuff like that. So you get rid of the R and you add E accent aigu. That's how that's all the participe passés for that. And then most for RE verbs, you get rid of the RE and add a U. So for example, there's a lot of exceptions again, so you mostly just memorize them. But will everyone go through every single être verb and write down what the participe passé would be? Do that now. That's the exercise for this slide. Okay, go through every single verb in Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp and write down what the participe passé or past participle would be. So I'll do the first one. It's devenir would be devenu, etc., etc. There's a lot. Oh, also, when we're doing oh God. What do you mean, Andrew? I'm like lost. Oh no, we do that. That's what I was about to say, I think. Although that wouldn't work because it's avoir verb. But for être verbs, I've never, isn't it only for être verbs, or am I tripping? I might be. But okay, no. What was I gonna say? Yeah, for être verbs, you have to make the gender of the subject and the gender of the past participle agree. So for every verb in Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp, when you do, for example, you're saying she went down the stairs. So you would say elle est descendue, but at the end of descendu you would add an E to make it agreeable with the she pronoun. Does that make sense? Yep, you're right. So you have to basically agree. It's basically subject-verb agreement, but you have to agree to the subject only if they use être as the auxiliary. So you would use for both elle and all the plural pronouns, you have to agree the participe with the gender and the number of the pronouns is what I was saying, sorry. And the avoir thing, I think we don't discuss it in B, if I'm not wrong. The avoir agreement we don't do unless I'm forgetting something from a year ago. Okay, let me check this. Devenu, revenu, retourné, so, okay, yeah. Venu, aller, être. Descendu. Yeah, no, but être we still talk about. Avoir we don't. Être we always do. We have to do the accordé. But for avoir we don't. Okay, what was I checking? Yeah, okay. Rentrer. Where'd you get rentrer from, sir? It's rentrer. You missed a few, but overall it's good. Let me just make the full list here. Revenue. Sorti. Venu. Aller. I'm writing all of them now. Just give me a second. Ne. Descendu. Entrée. Rentrée. Tomber. Rester. Arriver. Monter and parti. I think this is right. If I'm wrong, someone can correct me. We've got A speakers here, so, well, speakers. I mean, French aid people here, so that should be all right. If they correct me, they're right. But yeah, okay. So that's passé. Mourir turns into mort because it's a irregular IR verb. It doesn't follow any of the regular like things. It's just one of the ones where you have to memorize them in order to know. Okay. And I will, after I finish this, add in a slide where I'll look for all, like, most of the most common participases, and I'll add them all in a slide, because I realized I didn't do that, and that's probably really useful. So I'll do that after I finish the session. But are we good with passé composé? I assume so, but are we good? Yes? I'm going to take no answer as a yes. Okay, so the next is imparfait. This is basically, imparfait is French for past continuous, essentially. So it's like things that were ongoing, but it's still past, but it was ongoing. So, for example, if you're trying to say, I was cooking when he came into the house, for example. So the was cooking would be imparfait, and he came into the house would be passé composé, if that's a good enough example. So the way imparfait is structured is basically you take the present new form of any verb, whether that's er, ir, re. You take the new form, you get rid of the ons ending, and then you add the imparfait endings. So the imparfait endings are AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. Those are basically the endings. You just have to memorize them, and those go to the ending of the new stem for each verb. So, for example, let's do an example. If I said to make the what's it called? Imparfait for aimer, it would be something like this. So the new stem would be aimant, AIMONS, and then the imparfait, you get rid of the ONS and then I add the IONS. Does that sound good? Let's do another example. So if we did manger, can you guys find the imparfait for manger? Well, imparfait can be for anything, but well, that's the new form. But if you want to do the imparfait, you would get rid of the ONS and then add whatever ending you want. So if we were doing an imparfait for but yeah, you're right. You're right. That's right. So you get rid of the ONS and then you add everything else that you need to add. So for je, it would be manger with an AIS. Tu, it would be the same. Il, elle, you'd add the T instead of the S. And then for manger. Yeah, that's the thing. The E is important for the pronunciation. Manger. Okay. There are, obviously, it's French. There are exceptions. Some of them are être, avoir, dire, and lire. These are the four most common, irregular exceptions. It would be être, et for être, so you get rid of the re basically and change the accent on the être, so it becomes était, étions, étiez, etc. For avoir, it's av, so it would be avait, avion, aviez, avait. For dire and lire, you get rid of the re and add an s. For verbs that end in CER, so commencer, there's a few others, but I can't remember, also kind of like in the participe passé for recevoir, in order for it to be pronounced the same way, you have to do the cc deal instead of the C, the normal C. So for example, commencer, you would add the cc deal instead of the last C, and you get rid of the ER and you do the rest of the endings. For verbs that have IER, you keep the I, basically, if that makes sense. So it would be étudier. No, you don't get rid of the I when you do the AIS. AI, like for je, tu, il, and elle. You don't get rid of the I. Does that sound good for imparfait? Any questions for imparfait, or are we good? Okay. Okay, so this is probably this was one of the questions that was on the form that I sent out earlier. And people were asking, how do you differentiate between passé composé and imparfait, which I guess is a pretty common question. I remember we used to struggle a lot with that when I was doing French. And it's a fairly common concern, I would say. But basically, the main difference is that you use passé composé when something happened either one time or has already been completed, like long done. So it's like, I broke my arm, I ate food, I did this, I did that. So it's something that's already done, and it's mostly things that happened once, and it's a fully completed act. Imparfait is either you're describing something, so you're either describing background details, or you're talking about habits or repeated actions of the past. So something that, or like an ongoing state. Like you, for example, I was 10. You can't say that you, like, you wouldn't say that in passé composé because it was something that lasted a long period of time rather than just one instance in the past, if that makes sense. So a good example of a composite sentence, basically, that has both passé composé and imparfait would be, when I was 10 years old, I broke my arm. So you would say, quand j'avais 10 ans, je me suis cassé le bras. So you would say, when you say that you were 10 years old, you're describing a state. So you're going to say it in imparfait. But when you say you broke your arm once. It was a singular instance that broke your arm. So you would say that in passé composé. Does that make sense? Do we have issues with how passé composé versus imparfait works? Good. Okay. I'll just keep going, and then obviously, again, if you have questions, feel free to just add them in chat so I know that there's questions. Yeah. Okay. So, futur simple. Now, futur simple is basically, the simple future, if I translate it really directly, but it's basically to describe actions that will happen in the future, that are relatively certain that they will happen. So for example, if you're saying, I will go to the movies tomorrow, and you've made plans and you're going to the movies, you're going to say it in futur simple when you're saying it in French. Okay. And then what was I gonna? Okay, yeah, the structure for futur simple is, I would say, fairly easy. It's one of the more easier ones, because all you really have to do is remember the endings, and even that is basically from the avoir conjugaison. So, okay, so the structure is, you take the infinitive of the verb. So you take, for example, manger. That's our favorite verb right now. So you just take manger as it is. Since it's not an RE verb, you don't have to remove anything, and you just add the ending. So for example, for manger, it would be je mangerai, tu mangeras, il mangera, nous mangerons, vous mangerez, and ils mangeront. Well, mangeront. So it's fairly easy, where you don't have to worry too much about like making sure you remember a lot of the things. The only thing you really need to remember is the endings, and then obviously, again, French exceptions. So while the list I put on the side is not an exhaustive list, it is some of the more common verbs that we use usually, and so those stems you have to just memorize because they're irregular stems. So it would be, for example, for être, it would be je serai, tu seras, etc., etc. But yeah, so that would be the stems for each of those. Do we have any questions for futur simple? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay. That's basically all of futur simple. And then, okay, these two are more of the, I want to say easier, well, besides present, more of the easier conjugaisons, because you really only need to remember the conjugaison of two verbs, aller and venir, and that creates futur proche and passé récent. So futur proche is to describe actions that are about to happen or will happen really, really soon. So, for example, if you're saying for example, for me, it's 6 p.m. right now. If I was to say, I'm going out at 6:30 p.m., you would use futur proche because it's literally about to happen immediately, if that makes sense. For passé récent, it's basically the same thing but past, so something that just happened or that you just completed. So if you're saying, I just did my homework, that would be passé récent. So for both of these, it's basically you just have to remember aller and venir. For futur proche, you have to remember aller, because if you think of it this way, it's basically like, I'm going to do this. So aller is going to go. So you're going to say, I am going to do this. So you have to conjugate aller and then just add the infinitive. So, for example, you'd say, I'm going to eat. You would say, je vais manger. I will hand in the assignment versus I'm going to hand. Yeah, basically. So something that you're just about to do or something you will do in the future. That's the difference between futur proche and futur simple. For passé récent, you have to remember the conjugaison for venir, but you also have to add the de. So what would be a good example? For example, if you're saying I just ate, you would say je viens de manger. So it's kind of like I'm coming from doing this, because venir means to come. So you're basically saying I just came from doing this. I guess that's a good way to remember how it works. So futur proche, you're saying I'm going to do this. Passé récent, you're saying I just came from doing this. Does that make sense? Yes, no, yes. I'm going to take no answers as a yes, or no questions as a yes. Okay. Now we go into all the more tricky verbs, I guess. More tricky conjugaisons. All of this stuff, I guess, is more higher B. Like if you wanted to get like 7s in your writing in French B, then you would drop in a couple of these. But as far as I know, as ab initio, you don't have to worry about them, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't do ab initio, so I don't remember. Well, I wouldn't know, but I also don't remember if my ab initio friends had to do it or not. But I'm inclined to say no, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you don't have it. Cool. All of these are just more of the complicated ones where you're like, okay, I'm going to drop this in because it's going to win me brownie points with the examiner kind of things. Of course, if you do A, I don't know why you're trying to learn from me, because I'm not a native French speaker, but, you know, to each their own, I suppose. Yeah. Okay, so, plus que parfait. For plus que parfait, it's basically when you're saying, I had done this. Yes, thank you, Andrew. I do appreciate it. I'm just saying, if there's any, like, M25A students who are here to actually learn from me, I don't know why you would do that. I'm sorry. I did B. I don't, yeah. Anyway. What was I talking about? Okay. Plus que parfait would be something like I had done. So it would be I had eaten ice cream. That would be plus que parfait. I had dinner. Not quite, because I had dinner yesterday night is basically just passé composé. I had eaten dinner would be plus que parfait. So I'd eaten ice cream, or I had just done this, then this happened. It's more so when you're trying to describe something. So you're saying, I had just done this, and then blah, 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 blah. Like if you're telling a story, you would say, like, yeah. I'll change that, but yeah, okay. Cool. So I'm pretty sure Jenna is going to give a better example than I did, but I'm going to wait for her to be done. Yeah. So the way plus que parfait structure works is you add, well, the pronoun, and then it's basically similar to passé composé, where you have an auxiliary and then the participe passé, but instead of the normal auxiliary, you would use the imparfait auxiliary. So you use était, était, étions, étions, étiez, étiez, or avait, avait, etc., etc. So you use the imparfait auxiliary rather than just the normal auxiliary, which is basically the only difference between plus que parfait and passé composé. I mean, the same principles as passé composé apply, the same rules apply, it's all the same, like verbs that use être and stuff like that. It's just a way to, essentially, but it's also just a good way to, I mean, it's a good way to describe it, but it is also something that you should know as an SL student, I think. It's helpful when you're trying to describe actions in the past. So when you're trying to say, like, for example, I had eaten my dinner and then he came doing this, something like that. So you're trying to describe something that you did in the past, that it's still a completed action, but you're describing it. So instead of the I was eating dinner when he came into the house, you're saying I had just eaten dinner. I had eaten dinner and then he came home. So you're saying it's a task that you'd completed before the past that you're describing. It's essentially like if you were to draw a timeline, for example. So you're saying I did this and then this happened and then it's present. So when you're saying I had done this, that's the plus que parfait. And then you're saying this happened, that's the passé composé, and then now's the present. If that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling a lot, but it's like, yeah. Does that make more sense a little bit? If you don't fully get it, it's okay, because you don't really need it, but it helps if you know a little bit, I guess. Okay, so what's next? Futur antérieur. Now this is basically the counterpart for plus que parfait, but in futur. It is I had gone for a run, but like I think Jenna was just yeah. Yeah, okay. So futur antérieur is used to, again, it's a descriptive tense format where you're describing an action that will have been completed by a certain point. So when you're saying, for example, if you're trying to say, I will go to I'm trying to think of a good sentence. I will go to the park when I will, well, I'm pretty sure Jana can give a good example of a sentence that uses future anterior, but it's basically like, it's again, you're using have. So I will have done this by this time, if you're saying. So if you're saying, by tomorrow, I will have done my homework. If you're trying to say that, for example, that would be an example of futur antérieur. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm gonna assume. Yeah, I will have completed the assignment by 11. Sorry, I didn't see that. But yeah, that's a good example as well. The structure again is very, very similar to how plus que parfait takes from passé composé. So instead of the imparfait auxiliary, you're gonna use the futur simple auxiliary and then add the participe passé. So you would use je serai or j'aurai and then the participe passé. So it works there. Both ways. Does that make sense? I'm not going to spend too much time on these because it is like these are basically building on tenses that you already know and then just making them ever so slightly more complicated. But yeah. Is that good? Okay. So oh my god, we only have 3 left. And then these are the super annoying ones. Subjonctif, conditionnel, and gerundiv. To be fair, gerundiv is not as annoying. Subjonctif is probably the most annoying one. In my opinion. In my personal opinion. Anyway. So, subjonctif is... Now, this is the description I found online, but I don't know how to explain when we use subjunctive, so I'm going to let Jenna do it in chat, and I'll repeat whatever she says. But basically, according to the internet, it's used to express doubt, desire, emotion, necessity, possibility, or uncertainty. But I think Andrew or Jenna, either or, can give a better description of what it's used for. Yeah, so while they do that, I'll explain how the structure works and then we'll go back to when it's used. The structure is you take the present plural they them form. So your basically ENT endings. You get rid of the ENT and add the subjunctive endings. Now the subjunctive endings are extremely particular, I guess. It's basically for je to il, elle, it's the, I would say, être endings, and then from nous to il, elle, well, nous and vous are the imparfait endings, and then, well, that's a more complicated way of putting it, but you can just remember it directly. It's ending in e, es, e, ions, iez, and ent. Those are all the endings for each subjunctive verb. Now, for the stems, there are obviously exceptions. Like I said, stems, mostly you take the ENT form, get rid of that ENT, and then add the endings. But there are, like always, exceptions. So for avoir, it's a. The problem with subjunctive also is that it'll be the same for je, tu, il, elle, and il, elle pluriel, but it's not the same for nous and vous sometimes. So for example, avoir is AI and then AY, depending on whether you're using nous, vous, or je, tu, il, or elle. Same for être, where it's SOI and SOY, so soit, soit, and soyons, soyez, and then soit again. And then for aller, it's AILL. For faire, it's FASS. For pouvoir is puisse. For savoir is sache. Vouloir is veuille. Prendre is prenne. Venir is vienne. And voir is voir, but without the R. And then you add the Y for nous and vous. Those are the stems for subjunctive. And then you just add the specific endings. Yeah. Questions? This is one of the, probably, in my personal opinion, the most complicated tense in French that I have learned, mind you. But in my opinion, the most complicated French tense that to me made no sense for a long time. But, you know, it just exists, I guess. Yeah. Questions? No questions? Yes, just hop in. Hold on. Let me just. Well, you can't. You have revision. Just jump in. I'm not even gonna invite you. Just jump.
Hello.
Hi.
Right. So, basically, I mean, this is kind of a stupid one to explain, but it just shows that a sentence's meaning can be subjective, basically. So, like, with the expressions that Git was talking about, like, you know, it can be doubt or desire or emotion, and you use que with the verb. So, like, let's say I'm doubting that someone's gonna, like, come to something tomorrow. Like, you'd say, je ne pense pas qu'il va venir, or what else? Like, let's think of something else. Or je souhaite que je n'aurai pas d'école demain. Or, like, I hope I don't have school tomorrow. Or, like, if you want to say that something's, like, necessary, like, you can say, like, il faut que tu fais ton devoir. Alors. So, like, you have to do your homework. So, depending on the context of the sentence, like, what it's actually expressing could be different. But the point is that you use, like, the with it. If that makes sense.
Yep. Questions? So, no questions? That was a really good explanation.
Are you guys chilling with that?
I've taken no answer to mean yes at this point, so I will continue to take it that way.
I'll let you do your thing.
Okay. Thank you. Well, yes. Fast. But I'm going to assume everyone else understands more or less how subjunctive works. But yeah, again, it's always a little bit more of a complicated one, I would say. Okay, conditionnel. Now, I kind of like this one. This one is probably one of the more accessible, complex structures, I would say, because you can use conditionnel very often. You can be like, if this happens, this will happen, type situation. So it's basically to describe what would happen. Yeah, so the structure is infinitive. You get rid, again, this is similar to, what's it called, futur simple, but the endings are different. So if I go back to futur simple, where is futur simple? There. So the futur simple endings is AI, AS, AONS, EZ, ONT, For conditionnel, it's AIS, AIS, AIT. Oh, it's basically the imparfait endings. Basically, yes, I will share this PowerPoint presentation. I will. It's already in the chat somewhere, but I will add it again when I put the recording up as well. Okay. Yeah, it's basically a hypothetical or something you wish or hope would happen. There are a lot of exceptions in the stems, which I've added. It's basically similar to the futur simple ones, I believe. Someone asked, how do you just practice these tenses? Like, do you write paragraphs and tenses or something to ingrain it better? That would be the goal, because basically the thing you need the tenses the most for is your writing, and the only way you're going to be able to practice it in writing is if you write. So for me, well, not for me, but for a few of my friends, like they did a daily or every few days diary entry, and they made it a goal to include a certain number of tenses, and then got it checked by our teacher. Like, it wasn't like a personal diary entry, it was just like, for example, a recount of your day or something like that, or what you look forward to tomorrow, something like that. So then you can include as many tenses as possible, and then get it checked by someone who understands French better than you, obviously, and then they will be able to completely check it and go through all of it, which I think a lot of my friends did back in high school. The way I practiced was I did past papers. Yes, conditionnel does use imparfait endings. So what I did was I used past papers, and then I did random like writings and gave it to my teacher, but she was like, I don't mind whether you want to do it in the like just a normal like diary entry way, or just like write paragraphs. The more you write is the more you can understand how to integrate the different tenses, if that makes sense. Okay, conditionnel I'm done with, I think, and then the last one is gerundif, and then I'm pretty much done, and then I will take questions for like 10ish minutes, and then I'll take your leave, I guess. Leave you all alone to go studying. Okay, so gerundif is basically you're basically saying while doing this was happening. It's basically like simultaneous events when you're describing an action that was simultaneously occurring with something else. So a good example in English would be I was eating while watching a movie. So the while watching would be en regardant, and was eating would be an imparfait. Yes? Jana, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically that. Yeah, so it's used to describe an action happening simultaneously. The structure is en and participe présent. So the way participe présent work is you take the present new form in ONS, and you get rid of the ONS and then add an ANT. So yeah, Safa, you're right. You'd add an N to make it mangeant, but yeah, it's mangeant. So the exceptions, the three most common exceptions would be être, avoir, and savoir, which would be étant, ayant, and sachant. But otherwise, you take the present new form and then you add ANT. You get rid of the ONS and add ANT. Does that make sense? I'm going to take that as a yes, and I'm going to stop sharing at this point. If you guys have specific questions, put them in chat now. I'll answer them, or Jana will answer them. Someone will answer them. We're all here. And If you don't have any questions, feel free to leave. I will put up the presentation and the recording sometime tonight, hopefully. If you guys have specific things that you want to see as sessions, feel free to you can always DM me. My DMs are open, but also you can also always just ping me in the French ABB chat, and I will try my best to do sessions on things that you guys actually want to see, because there's no point in me doing random like things about, for example, listening if no one cares about listening, that kind of thing. So like Safa, if you want to do practice writing, we can do practice writing, but I would have to do a session on that. So it would be helpful if you guys have specific things, either put them in chat now, you can DM me, or you can put it in the French ABB chat and I'll check periodically anyway. I might also start doing like QOT question of the days, but like, for example, reading question of the day, so I'll add like an extract and then a question and then you have to answer it type thing. I might start doing that if I can build up a good enough question bank, that I might start doing that soon. But that'll probably be starting next week, because I'm gonna need this weekend to do all of that prep, I guess. But yeah, I mean, if there's no specific questions that you need me to answer, feel free to go. If you do have questions, again, yeah, feel free to. I'll stop recording now, but feel free to. I'm sticking around